Hey guys, Joe here, back to the Word. Today with a cool video, 12 oldish books to read when you are young. I want to go through this really cool list of books that's not original to me. It started with Kevin DeYoung. He first published it that I know of in the appendix to this book right here, Do Not Be True to Yourself. When I did my book review of this work that you can find on my channel, I left the appendix with these 12 books off, and I said you were going to have to buy this work to get that list unless Kevin DeYoung published it somewhere online. He has since done that at Westminster Books as well as on his publishing arm website, Clearly Reformed. And so I wanted to do this video with all of you guys to talk about these really good classic books that Kevin DeYoung says would be good for young Christians, those who are still forming what they believe, to read good books. One of the best things we can do as we're forming our beliefs and learning about God and different things in Christianity and our world is to read really great books. And so here's this book list from Kevin DeYoung, 12 of them that we're going to go through and I'm going to share with all of you. I'm going to put his post right up here on the screen beside of me so you can see his words, and then I'll elaborate as we go through them. Also, I'm going to tell you whether I've read those works or not, and I would encourage you to take score as we go through these. So leave a comment below this video. How many of these 12 have you read? What is your score out of all of these? And obviously the ones that I haven't read, I'm planning to add to my list, because these are books not just for young people, but for all Christians, and they definitely are beneficial for people to read early on in their Christian journey when they are young. So go ahead and put the post up here. He says these are 12 books, are classics in the best sense of the word. That not just because they are from another century, but because they deal with topics that never go out of style and are written in a way that transcends their own time and culture. He talks there, he says, the most important thing we can do when we are young and our beliefs and opinions are not yet fully formed is to surround ourselves and read really good books. He says, I hope this annotated bibliography below will help point you in the right direction. And he says, I've tried to pick books that are rich and deep, but also accessible and not overly long. So that's his putting these forward. I also would say most of these works are published by multiple publishers, so you can get different versions of them, but he's put up different example versions that we'll go through on this post. So just because I have that version doesn't mean it's the only version. You can pick them up cheaper digitally. Some are open, even public domain. So I think one or two of them at least you could probably find online, the PDF for free. So with that, let's go ahead and hop into these books together. First up in this list, Confessions by Augustine. Here is my copy right here by Penguin Books. You see this one right in front of me. Front of you on the screen says, Kevin DeYoung says, there may be no more influential theologian in the history of the church than St. Augustine of Hippo in North Africa. This autobiographical work traces Augustine's spiritual journey towards Christ through unbelief, philosophical wandering, and sexual promiscuity. What's really cool about Confessions is it's this great saint of the church, St. Augustine of Hippo, writing about his journey towards God. And he's actually writing to God, and he includes you in this prayer kind of journal to God about his journey, about his embracing of God, of him finding fulfillment in Jesus Christ. Great work here, great devotional work right here. Totally recommend it. So that's the first one on the list. The second one is a little book on the Christian life by John Calvin. So Confessions by Augustine, now a little book on the Christian life by John Calvin. So I have my copy right here. I read through this in 2022. It was really great. So this is actually 4 or 5 chapters. I think it's 5 chapters from Calvin's Institutes, but it's specifically the 4 or 5 chapters that deal specifically with the call of the Christian life to die to ourselves, to growing in sanctification, to growing in holiness. How are we to use our life here on this earth? And so Kevin DeYoung says about this little book of devotion and discipleship comes out of Calvin's much larger works, out of his Institutes. But it's a few rich chapters that should be accessible for us. He says, the Institutes of the Christian Religion. The French theologian and Geneva reformer provides a beautiful and stirring picture of true spirituality in this book. Really benefited from this read. Would encourage you towards it. I have read this. I have put up Confessions. I have read that as well. Moving on to the next one, Precious Remedies Against Satan's Devices by Thomas Brooks. Thomas Brooks is one of the easier Puritans to read. Here is my copy right here. I have read this recently, really enjoyed it. Kevin DeYoung says that in this work by English preacher and author Thomas Brooks, we see the genius of the Puritans for clear-headed organization and heart-probing spiritual diagnosis and gospel cure. I would add to that, Thomas Brooks in this part is really going after how does Satan prowl around like a roaring lion, and what are his tools and his devices for leading us into sin, and how can we use spiritual warfare, the armor of God, and the spirit within us to push against, to war against Satan's devices and to follow God. And so really great treatment right here from the Puritans. Thomas Brooks, this is a classic. Pick this up. Really enjoyed this read. And so there's that one that I have read as well. The next one on the list is Pilgrim's Progress. This is not a surprise to anyone. Potentially, after the Bible, probably the most sold Christian book ever. This is the most famous Christian allegory ever written, and by some accounts, the most widely attributed book distributed book in the world after the Bible. Bunyan understood the trials and triumphs of the Christian life and presented the journey of faith in a way that has inspired millions of Christians. You can get lots of these. He has that one up there from Oxford World Classics. I really love this illustrated one from Crossway Books that came out a couple years ago. Full text. It's got really good footnotes actually with different scripture allusions, index. So I really love this version. Would recommend it. There's lots of versions out there. I actually have a B&H version over there on the shelf that I read through and enjoyed with process questions that read and reflect on the classics at the end. So you might want to do something like that as well. Moving on to the next one, Holiness by J.C. Ryle. I actually do not have this book, and it is on my bookshelf. So as you can tell, I did not read this one. But Holiness is, according to Kevin DeYoung, Ryle, an Anglican bishop in Liverpool, combined a sharp theological mind with an unusually crisp communication. This is the best book for understanding the doctrine of progressive sanctification and growing in practical holiness. When Peter talks about Jesus saying, be holy for I am holy, what does he mean by that? How do we grow in our holiness? How do we grow to look more like Jesus Christ? This is going to be a great help in that journey. It's going to show what the nature of holiness is, what some of the hindrances to us growing in holiness are, and then the roots of our holiness. And so I'm looking forward to this read and would encourage you to add it to your reads as well. Next up, Orthodoxy with annotations. He has the thing there, guided by Trevin Wax. I have the book copy right here. I have not read this book yet, but it is on my reading list for very soon. I'm excited for this. It says, from theological treatises to biographies to detective stories, Chesterton was one of the greatest writers in the English language from the 20th century. This is Chesterton's witty and intellectually robust defense of the joys of Christian orthodoxies. As you get into this book, you're going to notice that Chesterton sought out to look for what was the spiritual religious system that we could come up. What's the best religious system for the world we see in front of us that would make sense of everything? And then after he starts out on that journey, he writes this book and comes to the conclusion that that religion already exists. It is Christianity. And so he's talking about orthodoxy and the beauty and the joy of Christian orthodoxy in this book. Next up, The Christian Family by Herman Bavinck. This is one I do not have in my library. It's on my wish list. I'm going to add it to my reading list. It says, Bavinck is best known for his multi-volume Reformed dogmatics, but this exploration of sex, marriage, and family life, though originally written in Dutch over 100 years ago, remains incredibly relevant for our day. As you're starting out in a young Christian in the world we live in today, it's good to have biblical picture of what sex, marriage, and the family life should look like. And this is a great guide and a great book on that. So I'm looking forward to reading this one soon. Next up, Christianity and Liberalism. There are lots of versions of this out there. I do not have this. I actually have this one pre-ordered right now from Westminster Seminary Press. They have a 100th anniversary edition. for this J. Gresham Machen book that's coming out in August. So I'm excited to get that. If you're watching this video later, maybe it's already out. And I would encourage you to go pick up this book. I'm really enjoying hearing about this book, and then I'm looking forward to reading it when I get my copy in August. But it's often been said that the most important word is the title "and" in this book by J. Gresham Machen. The Princeton Seminary professor who left to start Westminster Theological Seminary argues persuasively that theological liberalism is not a different version of Christianity, but a different religion altogether. So he's combating what was happening in 1923 when this book was originally published, and he was combating the fact that some people wanted to add these, that they weren't taking the inerrancy of Scripture seriously, that Jesus Christ didn't actually have a virgin birth. There was this liberalism, this creep into the church, and people were saying, hey, we can just be vague about what the Bible says. We don't have to deal down on doctrine specifics. And J. Gresham Machen wrote this book to say, no, this liberalism Christianity is not another version of Christianity. It's another religion entirely, altogether, this liberalism and Christianity. And so he's doing this book, and it's a great way to see how these ideas creep together in our age, and then we add it to our Christian belief, and then actually seeing that they're different ideas and they're not supposed to be together. So multiple versions of that book. Totally recommend the new version that's coming out by Westminster Seminary Press, and there's some great versions online as well. Next up, The Abolition of Man. I have my copy right here. I actually have not read this one yet, but it is on the reading list as well. C.S. Lewis, books are going to come up for him. He's known for Narnia. He's known for Mere Christianity, which I have read. I really love that one. Also, the Screw Tape Letters is really good. But page for page, Abolition of Man is Kevin DeYoung's suggestion. He says this is one of the most important things Lewis ever wrote. Lewis argues that in forgetting the God-given natural order of morality, we have made men without chests who try to see through first principles and therefore no longer see. I haven't read it yet for myself, but there's a description. Encourage you towards the read. Moving on, Redemption Accomplished and Applied by John Murray. I have this edition up that has a foreword by Carl Trueman in front of you. I actually have this edition on my wish list. I do not have this work right now. But this is Murray's treatment of salvation and soteriology and what is saved and how does it get applied to our lives. John Murray wrote a commentary on Romans. I have it over here on the shelf from Westminster Seminary Press, and I've heard that this is really his lectures and written for the church member that kind of deals with some of that Romans content. So DeYoung says there, a Scottish-born pastor and professor, John Murray, he was also at Westminster Theological Seminary, wrote this work of soteriology, that's salvation, as a series of articles for ordinary church members. You would be hard-pressed to find a more succinct and readable theological exploration of the work of Christ and the salvation of sinners. And so recommend that to you guys. That's definitely going to be a reformed perspective on that. So soteriology. So Kevin DeYoung is Presbyterian. So a bunch of these books, while they're broader evangelical, Orthodox, Christian, Catholicity with a small c, this is definitely one of those ones that's going to bring out that Presbyterian flair for those who just need to have that footnote there. Next up, classic, big one on the list, makes all the lists here, guys. Probably one of the number one Christian books recommended ever, and your pastor's favorite book, Knowing God by J.I. Packer. There are few books that communicate such glorious truth and communicate it as succinctly and as well as Knowing God. Through Packer's penetrating mind and gifting pen, the majesty of God and the wonder of the gospel shine through on every page. Easily one of the most influential books of the last half century. So I have my copy right here. I've read through this twice. I actually want to read through it again very soon. J.I. Packer's kind of thrust for this book is the most important thing about us as human beings is knowing God in relationship. And so he applies that to multiple areas of life and does it in a really cool way. I forget exactly right now. I believe they were originally some type of radio kind of lectures, or like they were small bits. It was written over a periodical that was published, but it's written for normal lay people, easy terms, but he lifts us up to see that knowing God and how we can know him, how he is, his chapter in here on adoption is really great. How God has adopted us into his family. There is gold in these pages. It's one of those books that I desire to read every 3 or so years of my Christian journey. It is that good, and I fully recommend it. There's multiple versions out there as well. Crossway just came out with a beautiful hardback edition that you see pictured on Kevin's blog right there. So fully check that out. J.I. Packer's amazing. Knowing God, excellent read. Definitely worth starting there. And then moving into the Holiness of God. This is number 12 right here. I have read Knowing God, and I have read this book right here, The Holiness of God by R.C. Sproul. I kept hearing about this book, and then I read this book. It is amazing. DeYoung says, no one did more in recent decades to remind us of the bigness of God than R.C. Sproul. This book will make sure we who were created in God's image do not recreate him in ours. So one of the big arguments that Sproul is going after in this book is to show how big God is. That God is not something small that we look at under a microscope and make big, but he is something like the galaxy that we use a telescope to make small so we can understand, but we can't capture that vastness. And so he's putting forth how big God is according to his word, and how we should never in any way, shape, or form think that we can comprehend him in a small way and fully, that we should make him into our image, that we should craft him into a God of our own understanding and making, but should remain him biblically glorious, transcendent, amazing. This is a book that will crush you as well as lift your spirits and just show you how big God is. And so fully recommend this read. It is really great. So with that, you guys gone through, those are the 12 books right there. I'll have the link to this article in the description for this video. I want to thank Kevin DeYoung for putting this list together. I think it was really good. And so I would like to hear from you. Which one of these books from that 12 is your favorite? Have you read through? Leave that in the comments. Also, how many of the 12 have you read? I put the 12 list in the description for the video. Go through, tally up your total. I believe mine is 4, 5. I think mine's 7 at this point. So I have 7 of the 12 that I have read parts of, or all of, and the rest of them are definitely on my wish list. And so I'm looking forward to reading those and sharing even more about this, maybe even a checkup video in the future with all of you. So with that, like, subscribe, share this with other people if this content encouraged you. Until next time, continue to read, treasure, follow the word. God bless, and I'll see you guys soon.